So just one or two loose ends to clean up before we finish this particular section, and it's just relating to the creation of an activity. Because we're not using the response that's coming back from the server, and in fact we're not getting our activity back from the server, what we need to do in here is add the client-side functionality so that when we create an activity, we add the user that's creating the activity as the host of that particular activity as well. So what we'll do is we'll go back to VS Code, and we need to go to our activity store, and let's find our create activity method, and here it is, this particular action. And what we want to do, after we've created an activity, we'll use this particular activity which we're using to set the activity in the registry as well, and we'll create an attendees array and then set our activity attendees to that particular array for the currently logged in user that's going to be the host of this activity. So what I'll do is inside this, or before we get to the run in action, I'm just going to use the create attendee function we created. So I'm just going to say const attendee equals create attendee, and then just pass in list.rootstore.userstore.user and add the exclamation mark, and then I'll say attendee.isHost equals true, and then I'll just create an array and just call it let attendees equals just an empty array, and then I'll say attendees.push and push our new attendee in there, and then I'll specify activity.attendees equals attendees. So after our activity has been created successfully on the server, what we're doing here is replicating what the shape of the data in our server looks like so that we can immediately add it to our client side of our application. And the rest of this stays the same because we're setting our activity here, turning off the submission flag, and because we're updating our local activity, as in the activity we're passing in, we're not updating any observables in this, so these don't need to be run inside an action. So let's just go test and create a new activity, and I'll just refresh the browser, and I'll just say test activity by Tom, and test, and of course we've got validation to prevent easy creation of an activity, and I'll just pick a date and I'll pick a time, and I'll just add a city and say somewhere and click submit, and this takes us to our new activity, and we've also got the host of the activity in here as well, although we should really be seeing the host flag on the activity sidebar as well. And another problem is that we're seeing the join activity rather than the fact that Tom is the host of the activity. So let's go back. And what we also want to do is actually set the activity is host as well, and just set this one to true, as well as the attendee being a host. We also need to set the flag on here to true as well, so that when we do create an activity, then what we'll see is just the manage activity button. So let's go back, and because our page is refreshed, we've now got the information coming back from the server. But let's just try another test in here and say testing, and I'll just pick anything and pick the same date and time and test and click submit. And now this time we see the manage event rather than the join event, and that's more like it. And we also just want to update the sidebar as well so that we see the host of the activity. So I'm just going to go to the sidebar, and what we've got here is just a const of isHost equals false, but we don't need that anymore. And what we can use is the attendee .isHost property, and that should resolve that particular problem. And sure enough, we can see that the host flag is on the right hand side, and if I pick another activity and pick this one, then we can see that we've got the host flag on there as well. So this is all looking good and how we want it. Let's just go and see what kind of warnings we've left behind in our console, and that seems too good to be true. So I'm just going to refresh the page. I find it hard to believe I've gone through an entire section without leaving some kind of warning in the console. This is highly unusual. I'm just going to click around a few more places and try and encourage a warning to pop out, but nope, it certainly appears that way. There's no warnings in the console, so please do make sure that's the same for yourself as well. And then what we'll do is we'll just head back to VS Code, and as we've come to the end of this particular section, let's commit and stage our changes into source control. And I'm just going to say end of section 15 and commit, and then push these on up to GitHub. And we'll finish off with a short summary.